Hello and welcome to another episode of the Treasure Talk Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Green, financial educator of the Treasure Biblical Financial Workshop, as well as a youth and family minister of the Highland Church of Christ in Bakersfield, California. This podcast is all about having healthy conversations on the subject of money from a biblical point of view. So if you are new to this podcast, make sure to hit that like button or subscribe to this channel on whichever social media platform you are listening or watching this from. And if you are watching this on YouTube, make sure you hit that bell icon to get notifications when a new episode is released. I am very, very excited about this episode because I get to sit down with two of my mentors who I also consider like father figures to me. These men have some great insight to our important topic for today's episode. So stay tuned. You won't want to miss this. So I am here with two of the most amazing men of Kern County, Brandon Evans and Miguel Salazar. Guys, thank you guys so much for coming and being a part of the show. We appreciate y'all and what you do. Could you guys just briefly tell us who you are, what you do for a living, and the work that you're involved in?
As BG's mentioned, my name is Miguel Salazar. I'm actually from Wasco, born and raised there, and I think one of the few that still live in the place that they were born. I currently been working for the Kern County Department of Human Services for over 20 years. I've never thought I'd make it that far, over 20 years, but here I am, and mostly been involved in when you think about social workers, a lot of people think like CPS, but there's actually two parts to it. There's the CPS, Child Protective Services, and there's also employment services. I've been working mostly with that, helping people, with education, job training, work experience, things in that capacity. For the last about going on 7 years, I've been supervising in employment services. I'm married to my wife Andrea. I have two sons, and what else? Oh, I currently preach and do administrative work here at the Wasco Church of Christ. So that's been a blessing. Hard work, but a blessing that I've been doing, kind of actively involved, as a Christian since I got baptized about 10 years ago. I love soccer, but I'm getting older, so I don't know. But then Brandon Evans keeps inspiring me because he's into jiu-jitsu. And sorry, Brandon, I took some of your bio, but when I see him training and doing all these things, it just, and as being a competitor, it just gets like, you get worked up and you get pumped up. So anyways, I'm hoping, with this whole COVID thing, once that ends, that I could somehow continue to play co-ed competitively. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. All right, Brandon.
All right, so Brandon Evans, I'm currently for the county. I'm a program director over eligibility services, which is just basically when people need help, whether it's financial, food, shelter, those things. It would be staff under my division that they would talk to get those services. I've been a preacher for over 20 years as well, and that has afforded us tons of opportunities to serve this community of Delano. in many ways, obviously spiritually, number one, but we've been able to help many people in some really dark times. Going even farther back, when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I worked to help young people, at-risk youth, find jobs, and that's what got me through most of my professional career is doing that, helping people connect themselves with opportunities to better themselves. I've been married for over 20 years, got a couple teenage kids, and like Miguel said, I am not opposed to choking you out.
So yeah, definitely don't want to mess with you. The next guy that we're gonna have on, he's a jiu-jitsu guy himself, so I'm sure they'll be able to do back and forth stories here. So hashtag Cliff Sabro. So anyway, so let's get into some of these questions. So you guys both mentioned how you guys are heavily involved in social service industry. Why did you choose the social service industry as a career? Brandon, you sort of alluded to that. Go ahead and sort of talk a little bit more about that. Why did you choose that line of work?
Well, there's a couple things. So first of all, I'm an at-risk youth myself. I was raised by my grandparents. My mother was incarcerated when she gave birth to me. Don't know who my dad is. Raised in the wrong part of Bakersfield, and so obviously that plus your faith gives you a particular perspective and mindset with regards to how much grace you feel you've received. Like you're just appreciative of what you have. You look to help others who might be in a similar situation, which is again why I ended up, even when I was still really young, already helping other young people to find employment. And then that sort of steers you in that direction of social services. What can I do 40 hours a week where I'm helping other people that are potentially down and out to get in a better situation? So in a nutshell, that's how I ended up there.
That's awesome. And I know that's part of even the reason why you are so heavily involved with a program called Delano Dads.
Yeah.
Can you tell the audience about that a little bit?
Yeah, so Delano Dads is something that I put together, I don't know, several years ago. And it's just not having a dad myself. It makes you very sensitive to the need for a father. And yet there's so many well-intentioned men who just don't have the right resources. They may not have had a dad themselves, and they don't know they're dads now, but they don't know really what that's about. Or they may have had a bad role model as a father, et cetera. There's just all these reasons why well-intentioned men can use some help. And so we jumped in with both feet, and each year run an 8-hour course where we try to help a group of men to improve themselves and improve their ability to be fathers to their kids.
That's awesome. I mean, I know that there's a lot. I'm sure. I mean, there's people even in this valley that we both know who have similar backgrounds, and the fact that you guys were resilient and God was with you all the way to where you are standing now, and you're like a father figure to many of us, and we greatly appreciate that. So, Miguel, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why did you choose the social service industry?
I didn't. It's almost, it's kind of funny, like it found me. And what I mean by that was that that I'm a first generational, my parents came from Mexico, settled in Wasco. I was born, like I mentioned earlier, in Wasco. And after graduating, it was just, hey, let's go to college. That was the thing to do. And I really didn't have an idea. I mean, I went down the line from thinking like, do I want to be a doctor? Do I want to be this? Do I want to be that? Next thing you know, I'm just like, I just need to graduate. So after finally graduating, I was working extra help, and I had taken this exam, and next thing I know, I get a phone call and says, hey, do you want to interview? I end up interviewing. for an employment counselor in social services, and as soon as they offered me the job, I said yes. So that's how that happened. Now, once I got settled in and started just to see what this program was about and how it was helping people and so forth, I knew it was a good fit because I've always had this thing about helping others, being compassionate, and just trying to serve. So the more I got interested in my job, it started to grow with me, and it's one of the things that I enjoy doing, especially I would say during my, I think, 8th year for the county. We started developing these workshops in-house, where we train people by facilitating, about job readiness, interviewing, building resumes. And that really got me even more interested in my job, especially when we would help people get that job and how it would change, their lives and how grateful they were. After that, I was sold on continuing my career in social services, for employment services, I should say.
That's awesome. I mean, the fact that, you were just honest, like I wasn't trying to go for this. This wasn't my passion or dream at the time, but the fact that because you saw the vision and you saw how this could truly help people, you were passionate about that, and that's sort of the same reason why I decided to get into the financial industry. It wasn't so much that I was some financial guru or I had all these things figured out. It was the fact that when I saw people and I could help them develop a financial plan for the betterment of their lives and their families, that's when I'm like, aha, and I saw a connection to how I do that as a preacher. I mean, all three of us, we had that experience. We see how the gospel can really change lives. And I really think that when we help people with their physical needs, people are willing to then hear about their spiritual needs. We have a window that maybe we wouldn't have had if we weren't in the industries that we were in. So I think that's awesome. That's great. So still talking about just the social service industry itself, what are some of the usual needs that people are seeking in social services? Because I'm sure that people are listening to this and they probably have preconceived ideas, based on the media, the movies and such. They have this typical viewpoint of what a person who's needy looks like, but you guys are, interacting with these kind of people day in and day out. So what are some of the usual needs of people seeking social services? I'll start with you, Miguel, this time.
Yeah, some of the things that we mentioned, normally though, let me just start over. Most of the time when somebody just goes in there, they're applying for cash aid, food stamps, which is now called CalFresh, and Medi-Cal. Once they're in that using those services, especially with they qualify for cash aid, some of them then qualify for employment services with a CalWorks program. That's where you see the extension of a program where we help them out with anywhere from counseling, work experience, job training, going back to school, finding work. So those are some of just the things that are available there. There's even DV services. So there's an array of services that's available to help. The goal is to help them become self-sufficient. So normally when someone goes there, those are some of the things that they're looking for.
All right. Brandon, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, sure. So, and when Miguel mentions DV services, he's talking about domestic violence services.
Yeah.
One of the things that's interesting about us government folk is we tend to use initials for everything. And so for anybody who's watching this later on, because a lot of people come to us when they're in a really bad spot. Mm-hmm. A lot of us come, and so that they may have just had a very violent situation, and you're a young lady and you got 4 kids, and you just got kicked out, and your boyfriend or maybe your husband just got locked up because of what he may have done to you, and so that puts you in a situation where you're looking, how am I going to feed my family, and where are we going to live and stay, and so we provide all those services. But just to add to what Miguel said, one of the things that we do when we do our job well is we provide guidance, we provide encouragement, direction, um, uh, feedback. There's a lot of people who have made some really bad choices, and without some help with decision making and being forced to look themselves in the mirror a little bit, they're just going to continue to make many more of those same choices. And so that is something that people don't tend to think about. I'll give you one other perspective. When Miguel and I both got into this business, the clients were older. They were late 30s, 40s. As Miguel would attest to as well, they're babies, early 20s. You know, the average age is probably 23, 24. And there's just so little life understanding and all of that. And so the ancillary services, okay, yeah, we're gonna give you money for rent, we're gonna give you money for food, we're going to pay for your health insurance, all that, yada yada. But I think the true social service component is that help in these other areas that sadly are not being found in the home. And so that's what I would add.
Wow. So you guys, I mean, I think you would agree with this, that your job, your industry is there to really help the overall of the person. It's not just simply just getting them the job, but you're a counselor. You guys are there to help them through some very, like you said, very difficult moments in their lives. And there's so many of you, just different departments and different areas that people can seek that kind of help. So again, I think you guys would agree that your social service industry is designed to help people get to the point where they're self-sustaining. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes.
Right. So one thing that, and I hope this question doesn't get you guys in trouble with maybe your industry, but what are some areas, though, since you guys have been in this job or in this game for a while, what are some areas of improvement that you guys wish could be implemented in your field or in the social service overall? Do you guys see like areas where you're just like, man, if I could, if I were in charge of this, or if I could pull these strings, I would make this happen? Are there some things that you guys wish were different?
Yeah, so I'll jump in on that one first. And you're right. When you work in this field, some of the answer to that question may be a little bit of a minefield, full of lots of traps. But the fact of the matter is this: you have the eligibility side where you get linked up with these kind of supportive services like money and help with your bills and things like that. But then there's the welfare to work side that is supposed to come in tandem. Okay, so in a structure, it looks like this. Okay, so you're in crisis. We're gonna provide you some stabilizing assistance so that you're no longer in crisis. But then we're going to marry that with these other services, job search training, just training period, education, all these things to help get you out of that so you can be, using your word, self-sustaining, or we might say, self-reliant or whatever. But in California, from the state down, we've whittled away at the work part of welfare to work. Mm-hmm. And the dangerous part of that is you basically take the welfare service industry back to a place that it was in the 70s, where it was sort of just like you get on, and as long as you have kids, you just stay on. Mm-hmm. And as a Christian, that's not helpful to anybody. Mm-hmm. As Christians, we are not called to Christ to continue to be served. We are called to Christ to be like him and be of service.
Mm.
And in the same way, helping people who have needed government assistance to get off of the assistance and put themselves in a position where they can then turn around and help others, that's the ideal. But if there isn't structure around the program, it actually works against human nature to do that.
Mm-hmm.
If it becomes rather easy to get a monthly check and food and all of these other things, supplemental electricity bills and et cetera, I mean, all these services, it may make it actually easier just to sit back and stay on the system as opposed to getting yourself off the system and able to help others as opposed to just you being helped by the government.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned, I mean, I think that's exactly when we start talking about more of the church and its responsibility when it comes to benevolence, which maybe somebody's listening to this and thinking that's such a fancy word. I don't know what that means. But when we talk about that, I think that's one of the struggles that we sort of want to backpack a little bit on, do we continue to help people even when they're abusing the system, right? So we'll get to that in just a moment. But Miguel, do you have anything to add to what Brandon said?
Yeah, I'd just like to add, that, Brandon's right. So for example, before this whole COVID thing, I used to go to collaborative meetings, so just picture myself representing, the department, and then you meet with other people who offer all these other types of services. It's amazing. In the last 20 years, I would go to a collaborative meeting and you might find like maybe about 10 people, 12. Now, sometimes you find a room full of 20, 30 people with all of array of services. So we're really fortunate in this country that we're offering so many things, but at the same time that we're offering so many things, what is the adverse effect of that? And one of the things that's happening, we're taking some of the accountability away, from basically from the one who is seeking services, how much they want, how much are we helping them, or are we enabling them to some extent? And sometimes that's the adverse effect with having so much provided, because pretty much anything that you could think of when it comes to the program, there's some type of help available for that person. And we know that to be true because there's been a lot of success stories within the program. Some might say, well, this program never helped me or anything, but we could counter that with the many examples of those people who graduated from college, who graduated from training, who found a job and all of a sudden, closed their cash aid and they're self-sufficient. People that we run into, I could be shopping at Costco and then it's like, hey, Mr. Salazar, do you remember me? And I really appreciate what you did. Now I got this. Some have opened their own business, so the program already provides a lot of things for them. The only thing is, how much accountability is there when it comes to their participation in that program. So hopefully we're able to balance those things to best serve the clients that we help out. But there's plenty of help available. It's just up to the individual, I would say, to take advantage of that.
No, I love that. And I love that you mentioned, you get to have the privilege to run into people that you've helped in the past who were successful. And, just that feeling of, hey, they remember the help that you gave. But I think that goes to show to people who are super critical of the system, for every bad egg out there who abuses it, there's a lot of people who are using it for the right reason, and they are successful when they follow the program the way the program was designed to be followed. So I appreciate you guys saying that. So this is really more of a side question, not really in our topic necessarily, but it's just a bonus curiosity question. I just want, since I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this are probably believers in Jesus, God-fearing people. My question is to you guys is, should Christians feel shame for seeking help from social services? Whichever one of you want to jump.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay. Excellent. Great question. And first of all, let me say that people who are overly critical of the system need to understand the origins of the system.
Mm.
And so I'm going to say, let me speak to that super fast, and then I'll jump
go
to
ahead.
the question. So almost every municipality, every city, county is going to have some sort of street service, like where they sweep the streets, like the big machines, tank-looking things that go around and clean the streets. Why do they have that? They have that because people stop picking up after themselves. And so when trash is left on the ground and nobody picks it up, then the government gets involved in trash collection because you're not picking it up for yourself. Well, in the same way, when people are in a bad way, and the church in particular, or their neighbors or whatever, aren't as helpful as potentially they could be, there becomes a gap, and people vote for elected officials who say we are going to help fix that gap by providing government services. So you really don't have one without the other. In a simple way, you don't have one without the other. So there's a need, and when individual people aren't filling that need, government often steps in to fill that need. So there's that. Which then, to your question, should a Christian feel, I forget what words you use, but embarrassed or ashamed?
Shame, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer it the best way I know how. The simple answer is no, they shouldn't. However, Christians should be able to go to other Christians first before they go to government. It's actually a better way to get help, because when you get nameless money from the government, nameless services from the government, as using the word Miguel brought up earlier, there's very little accountability. It's much easier for me to owe money to somebody I don't know than it is to owe money to somebody I do know. The amount of accountability is tenfold when you actually know the human who you owe money to. Well, it's even worse when it's the government, because you don't even feel like you owe it back. It's almost, that's why we call them entitlements, and people feel entitled to them. So it's better to go to a family member, the church first, and then, but if that's not possible, it's not available, then government has all sorts of services, and what we're talking about is one of them. But you should not stay on it any longer than you absolutely have to.
Right.
None of us are better off when we're put in a situation where we're so comfortable that it makes us lazy. And by lazy, I mean not doing all that I can for myself first. And so before I ever dip into the pocket of someone else, and someone may say, well, when I get on government services, I'm not dipping into anybody's pocket. Yes, you are. You're dipping into the pocket of every taxpayer who paid taxes into the system from which you're drawing. So should you be ashamed to get the services? No, that's what they're there for. Should you be uncomfortable about staying on them for a second longer than you absolutely need to? Yes. Yes, because again, God called us, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, as his children, to be the ones who serve, not the ones who are served. To be the ones, God calls us out of a bad situation into his grace so that we can be lifted up in him and then help others. But I can't do that if I'm too comfortable allowing myself to continue to be helped when I can otherwise get out of it. So that's.
Well, that's good. That's good. Miguel?
Yeah, no. I would just add, that circumstances could happen to anyone. For example, a loss of a job that just put, as maybe you're the sole income earner, right? And all of a sudden you lose your job, right? And you're displaced, or maybe there's a death in the family. We had people looking for help when receiving these services who their husband just passed away, for example, or for example, divorce, which unfortunately is too common nowadays, that breaks up the family and just causes so many issues, that become overwhelming for anyone, depending on their support system, right? So no, I agree with Brandon. They shouldn't be, but going back to some of the things Brandon said, I would say it should be the last resort. Meaning, what have you explored, in your support system? Who could help you out with the situation you're going through, before you eventually, seek out these services. And once you do, you should have a plan, especially if you're part of the church, and hopefully you're seeking guidance, from the church and those who are able to give you that advice, that you should have a plan so you're not receiving these services in the long run, where once again, you might get a little bit too comfortable that you're continuing to receive these services and you end up staying much longer than you thought.
Right.
So that's something that we got to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree with you guys, and I'm glad that you guys brought that up. This is why, I'm speaking as one who I've been in the system since I've been here in California. I've had times where I needed it, but as soon as we didn't need it anymore, we weren't trying to reach for it and keep grabbing it. But we've had to back and forth be in the system because of my employment situation. I'm sure for both of you know that I've been let go of congregations at least twice. And it was a very scary time. Didn't know what I was going to do for work, didn't know where we were going to go, and not from a lack of trying. And we had to, get that kind of help. And we were thankful that kind of help was there. And then when COVID hit, we still, there were moments where we needed that kind of help. So I'm sure, especially now, I think most of us have experienced social services. I mean, I think our entire nation pretty much has experienced social service now. But yeah, we shouldn't want to stay on it. We should always be striving. And that's really why I got into the financial service industry, especially from the standpoint of helping people developing their financial portfolio, their budget. Because I really think if we plan for moments like this, your job is not as secure as you would like to think. And people just don't understand that. So saving that emergency fund for, however many months you think it will take you to get another job is important. Of course, our entire, as Christians, money is not everything, and we shouldn't always be so concerned. I mean, God does provide, and we really do need to trust in that. But I think that God also understands the idea of planning. He gave us a brain to do that. So when there are moments in our lives where we have to do that. And I think when we do plan for those times that may occur, then we may not have to resort to social services right away, or even family members right away. We can take care of that. But again, if for some reason we do, we should be able to go to the church first. And sometimes it's unfortunate that, that kind of help may not be available to the brotherhood. And that's something, again, that we want to sort of talk about. So let's get into this idea of benevolence then, since we're already in the topic. So what exactly, I mean, again, we've been using this fancy term, benevolence, a term that most people outside of the church don't usually use, so what exactly is benevolence? And why is this the term? Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Why is this the term that the church decides to use? I'll start with you, Brandon.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know why, but I know what. So I mean, the term is just like you said. It's often only used in a church context. Currently, word just to describe doing good things for other people. Doing helpful things, kind things for other people. That often looks like things like food, shelter. Whatever, taking soup to somebody who's sick, providing a warm blanket for somebody who's cold, and things along that line. And as we marry these two things, I want us to be mindful that to some degree, the church is getting and has gotten over the past 40 years, pushed out of the financial part of that because government is fully engaged in that.
Yeah.
And that is why, like in Delano, we've done a job search workshop before, because when you think of what is the kind thing to do for your community, it's not always give them food. And let me give you a quick example. Right now in Delano, I don't know about Bakersfield, I don't know about Wasco, but in Delano, all of the schools are providing food in large amounts to everybody. Basically, everybody who's got a kid in school has access to lots and lots of food. So kids aren't going to school, but they're getting, the school lunch times 10. and so is there really a need for food in the community given by the church when you can go to the school where your kids go to school and get that? Maybe there is, maybe there's not.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always a need to help people to put themselves in a better position to be successful. So you talked about your financial services. I'll give just one quick job search tip that I think is important to this conversation. And it's basically this. Everybody can do this. You can do this in 10 minutes. You sit down and you make you draw a big circle and a little circle in the middle, and the little circle is you. And then the bigger circle, would you put as many names of people that are full-time employed. So you have you in the middle, and around you is a bigger circle with all the names of the people that are full-time employed. And then you add a couple asterisks, stars, check marks, whatever you need based on 2 more categories. Could I work where that person works? I may not do the same job, but could I work where they work? That's one. And then the last layer is, do they respect me? Not do they like me? Not if they think I'm funny, but do they respect me? Because every person in that bigger circle that's full-time employed, if you can work there and they respect you, those are the people you need to be talking to about your next job opportunity. And I say that because even when you are employed, you should be building that. The number of people that that are full-time employed, that respect you, that know you and you know them, and you know a little bit about what they're doing, that network should be growing and growing every day. And when you end up in a bad situation, you have a starting point that's already populated with opportunities that you haven't pursued, but they're there. And so I say that because to me, it's kind. To me, it's helpful to help people to help themselves in those ways. Whereas 50 years ago or 100 years ago, that may not have been the cheap way you helped. The cheap way you helped is, well, I've got food, you don't have food, here you go. because there is, as Miguel talks about with his community groups, there's tons of places for you to get food. There's tons of places for you to get all sorts of services like that. But there's not a lot of access to the kind of information that puts you in the driver's seat for helping yourself get out of a bad situation. So, long answer, but that's not.
No, that's awesome. And I especially liked what you said. Well, I liked all of what you said, but at the beginning, you gave the simple definition of benevolence: kindness towards other people. It's not I'm going to do this to put something over your head to where you're going to feel guilty, and feel obligated to pay me back. That's not what this is. This is true kindness. Basically, this is a gift that I'm giving you to better yourself, like Jesus gave to us to better our spiritual self. So I like the definition that you gave. Miguel,
let me just jump in.
Go ahead.
Let me just jump in super fast when you you think of Peter when he finds the lame man at the gate beautiful. Silver and gold have I none, but what I have I give to you. Stand and walk. See, he didn't give him something like a sandwich.
Right.
He gave him the ability to go make his own sandwich. And that's huge. That's huge. And I think that's kind. I think that's helpful. So, okay, I'm.
Good. Miguel, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah. Yeah, when you had asked Brandon and myself, to talk about this topic, I was just looking around trying to just get a little bit more informed, And one of the things I ran across was, I was watching this Church of Christ study, and it said that the Churches of Christ refer to three pillars, evangelism, edification, and benevolence. Evangelism, with preaching, the gospel, edification with building and sustaining the church, and benevolence, about what Brandon just, talked about, and you described, as kindness. But it should be an attribute that all Christians, should have and are given as an order for us to demonstrate as Christians. For example, in Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16, talks about what, us being the salt of this earth, right? It says the salt of this earth, the light of this world, so it needs to be something that we strive for, and the attitude behind it. There's scripture, in I'm looking at my notes, 2 Corinthians chapter 8, and in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, the examples that we see in there. And let me just read some of that scripture, because I think it gives some really good an explanation or description, of the mentality and the attitude that we should have. So for example, let me just read verses 1 through 5. We want you to know, brothers, about the grace of God that has been given among the churches of Macedonia. For in severe test of affliction, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflown in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I could testify, and beyond their means of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And this was not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. And then obviously we go to chapter 9, verse 6, and here's more of that attitude. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion. But here's the thing, here's the part: for God loves a cheerful giver. So there's all these descriptions, right? First John chapter 3, talks about, God does not love, abide in us in his love if we're just not, showing love for others, right? And I have in Acts chapter 20, verse, I think 35, where Apostle Paul is just saying, look at the things I'm doing so I could show you, right? The type of attitude we should do in helping those that are weak, those that are in need, right? And he ends up by using Jesus, it's more blessed to give than to receive, right? So I would just add that there has to be like this mentality, this attitude, not just going to Bible study on Wednesday and Sunday and not doing anything, but when there's an opportunity, the attitude behind it, and all these things that are available, that we could help out. And are we taking advantage of those opportunities that are in front of us when it comes to showing benevolence to the brethren and to those around us, even our neighbor?
No, amen, amen. It was interesting, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but in the passage that you read earlier, he said that there were people who were even extremely impoverished that still helped. Like, so this isn't just, people who are, rich or wealthy who are trying to help those in need. I mean, needy people helping needy people, so they saw their responsibility beyond even their financial means to help whoever they could with whatever they had. And I stress when I do these workshops and even some of my own clients who are God-fearing people, I stress to them, like, I want you to be able to help others, but at the same time, you also need to know how to manage your money so you can help other people. So if your mindset is on God and helping the kingdom, then that's where you're going to place your money first. And I think that's one of the things that we fail to think about. I mean, these people placed their finances to God first. And I think like the book of Acts talks about the fact that they didn't see anything that they had their own. They saw everything belonging to God anyway. So it was very simple for them to say, you know what, even if I only have two pennies to my name, I'm going to give 1 penny to my neighbor, you know? So that was their attitude. That's what they were all about. So yeah, kindness, and everybody just, you know, helping each other. And when that happens, there was not a needy person among those group of people, which was awesome, which unfortunately we don't see that often. So I know we're limited on time. I got a few more questions I want to ask here. So I want to, okay, so how, I think you guys already alluded to this several times in your discussion about your connection with the industry that you're in and the work that you do in the kingdom. But how is there any more that you can say to how working for social services has helped you with how you view, how you do kingdom work in ministry?
I'll just answer quickly. Yeah, what's helped me tremendously, like just working where I'm at right now, is that it just helped me become very resourceful. It just like all these resources just kind of fall in your lap because of where Brandon and I work. You know, we get emails constantly. We're in collaborative meetings or some type of meetings, right? And all this information is being funneled back and forth. So you develop this huge network, right? So if you know, like for example, you talked about what you're striving to do, educating people, right? That there's someone providing that service. And even right now, right, we're finding out another resource, which is BG, right? About how he could help those that might be in need with that type of education. But the bottom line is that's helped me tremendously, is just becoming so resourceful. You need food, okay, got this resource. You need counseling, I got this resource. You need this, got this resource. You need childcare, got this resource. So that becomes very, very helpful, because most of the time those are the basic needs that someone is needing, and we have some idea where to start at and then build, so we could eventually help someone outside of the church, so it's not only within the church but outside, connecting them to these resources.
No, that's awesome. I mean, and that's really important to think about too. Like, you don't have to be the jack of all trades. Like, you can pass people on to other like-minded individuals or people that that can help them in that area that maybe you're not as familiar with. I think that's why we're a team. We're a family, we're a team. We're supposed to be working together. Even though we may not be of the same congregation, we're still part of the same big team that's across the whole entire world. So we should be using one another in that regard. I love that. Brandon?
Well, I'll piggyback off of that. Jovan Paez and I have teamed up multiple times to people stumble upon him in great need, and then he hits me up and I can get them connected. And we've even been able to do that with people in jobs, helping people find jobs because of our connection. So yeah, that becomes the thing, is you learn so much about where the help is, both within the church and without, and you utilize that for those that God puts in your way, in your path to provide service to.
That's awesome. I mean, I wish there was, this may be another video or another podcast for another time, but maybe just, doing some type of training to like teach other Christians what kind of resources are available, what's out there, because I think and maybe I've experienced this a lot, especially with the congregation I was with before. It seemed like because I wasn't as familiar with the area, and I think a lot of the members weren't familiar with the services that were available, it's like when somebody asked us for something, like we didn't know where to turn them, and then we would say like, well, you may have to go to the church down the street. Maybe they got something, and I felt shame. Like I felt like, man, like I should know, at least the basics of what's going on in my community, so.
Well, yeah, and let me just chime in on that. The other thing is when you work in an industry like Miguel and I do, you also have the information necessary to figure out who really is in need and who's just gaming the system.
Mm-hmm.
Because because both Miguel and I, in a matter of 4 or 5 questions, can figure out whether or not somebody qualifies for government assistance, et cetera, et cetera. And so when somebody comes by and says, "Oh, well, I've tried to this and I've tried to that, and that's not available to me," it's like we can already know what would be available to you if that were the case, and and all these things. And I've actually been able to help some people from that way because you stay on that truth, which is, no, I know you're not being quite honest with me. Now let's get into some honesty, and it gives them some true food for thought. Not that you're against them, not that you're um, unwilling to help, but sometimes again, you're not helping people when you're enabling them to continue to live a lie where they're going around trying to manipulate other people, and that's the only skill they're developing. They're not developing the skill of sales or becoming industrious. They're just developing the ability to make people feel sorry for them and give them things when they really could use all of those same skills to make an income for themselves.
No, amen. I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly, which sort of aligns with the next question. At what point do we stop being benevolent towards people? I think we would agree that we should never stop being benevolent. But like you said, like you alluded to, there are panhandlers out there. There are people that abuse systems that are designed to help. But I guess the conflict that I have, and I guess maybe I'll sort of answer the question, at least from my standpoint. The conflict that I have is that I don't want to be abused by people. But then I look at my Lord and Savior and I know that he was abused by the world, So like, can I still, be the person I'm supposed to be, even though sometimes I may get abused? Does that mean that as I've witnessed some Christians, when they get abused just one time by one person, they stop everything? Like, they're not going to be benevolent to nobody. They don't want to open up to anyone because of one person's actions. And I don't think that's right either. So what would you say to that question? At what point do you stop?
Yeah, I think, I was thinking about that, and, at what point, I was thinking about 1 Timothy chapter 5, where it talks about, orphans and widows, and specifically with the widows, how do you help a widow out, right? And it just outlines these steps, basic how to come back. I mean, how to just go through this whole process to determine, who qualifies and who doesn't qualify for this help. And in the same way, using some of that same logic, you just have to determine, is it someone who is really a worthy recipient, of the resources that you're able to give? Because if you give to one person that wasn't in need, then you might not have enough resources to give to someone who was in need. So it becomes this balancing act, I believe, when it comes to who is deserving and who isn't. You should always have the best intentions, but as Brandon had mentioned, sometimes when you're helping someone out and you're just having a natural conversation, things reveal themselves and they weed themselves out, unfortunately. So, for example, they come to you, they're asking for help, and then you start talking to them because not only do you want to provide a service, you want to help them solve that situation. And then you come to find out that sometimes they'll go like, never mind, you don't really want to help me or whatever. So sometimes just being helpful, but asking these questions and so forth, they start to weed themselves out. Yeah. But the ones who do need the help, they're going to be there. They're going to end up taking these steps, or they're going to just do whatever is required for them to get that help. But you still want to use good judgment when you're trying to provide those services, because sometimes you do have to say no. Sometimes you have to show this tough love at that moment, that that no matter how much I help you, you're gonna still continue in the same path. So sometimes you got to just be careful that you're not enabling someone.
Yeah, yeah. I mean that what you said, Miguel, is so true. I mean, if we really care more about a person than just giving them $1 for them to just get by for a moment, basically putting a band-aid on the situation, when we really care about people, then we're going to ask those right questions. And then, yes, sometimes people will weed themselves out because they'll just be annoyed by the questions. But when you really care about someone, I mean, you don't want to just put a band-aid on the situation. You want them to be successful overall. And I don't think we're in the Band-Aid industry as Christians. We're not. We're about fixing the whole of man, helping the whole of man through the gospel of Jesus. So I really appreciate what you said there. Brandon, you got anything else to add to that?
Just it is a person by person answer.
Mm-hmm.
A drug addict may need your help longer than someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's physically handicapped may need your help longer. So I don't know that I have a one sentence answer for that. Love, and the right intentions should drive how long you think you should be helping them.
Right. I think as Christians, we shouldn't refuse help. We should figure out how to help, if that makes sense, So yeah, I love that. And then last question, and this is probably more of a doctrinal question from the standpoint of, who are we benevolent to? There's a lot of debate in the church, and it's been going on for years over, who do we help with the money that's collected on the first day of the week, right? So some Christians say, well, it says we are only supposed to help the church and nobody else. Matter of fact, it's up to the individual outside of the church to then help somebody who's outside of the church, and then you have people who, we help people, and it's not about trying to, we help regardless if we mention Jesus or not. I know of congregations that have all of these great activities and programs for people when it comes to helping them, but it doesn't seem like it connects anywhere to introducing them to Jesus, so I'm not saying that the only motivation is, well, I just want to cram the Bible down their throat. That's the only reason I'm helping you. However, I think that there is a truth to the fact that, I mean, our number one goal is to save souls, right? So what would you have to say to that discussion of, who specifically is the church able to help using the money that we collect every week?
Okay, so I'll give the fastest answer I can. Miguel made reference to 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians is an easy indication, along with Acts 2, that the funds of the church should be used for other Christians in need. The book of James gives you indication that at least individuals should be willing to help other individuals that they find in need. To me, those are non-debatable. The only more gray area of which I side in a more liberal way is can you use money from the church treasury to help those that are not members of the church? And I just can't find any reason why not to. if you have it to give, and I'll cite the proverb on that, but if you have it to give it. And it's just an extension of the body individually is the body collectively. and so our congregation, we give when a need is brought to us, and we think that we're helping and not enabling.
No, I agree completely with you. I think that's the dilemma, right? There's not a passage that directly says you better give to, you know, a non-Christian solely from the collection plate. However, we don't have a passage that says you can't at all, you know, but there is no debate about that. The emphasis is definitely, or at least for the collection that was made, especially in First Corinthians and in the book of Acts, that collection was specific to a specific group of people. For a specific need, the Jerusalem church being that specific need, because of the famine that was happening during their time. You know, so, but that doesn't mean that that's the only time.
Yeah,
You know,
that's my answer.
yeah, exactly, right. But
so
some would
2,000
think,
years later, there's never another situation that could have been recorded.
right. But I think the principle definitely is we better be there for our own, right? We better be there for taking care of one another as the kingdom. But our help doesn't, it can out well, what's the word I'm looking for? Our help can also we can outreach also to people outside the church.
Well, and individually, we need to be willing to do that.
Right.
People shouldn't default to the church to cover a situation that God has put on in their lap.
Right.
And that's part of it,
yeah.
Which is why I think there's some pushback, because,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I don't know this person, you know this person, help them.
Right.
You know, because sometimes it's every time you have some situations like, okay, the church needs help always, and there can be times for that, but individually, we need to take the individual blessings that God has given to us, right, and use them to help others on our own. Okay?
Right. It's both. Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. Miguel, you got anything else to add to that?
No, just, you know, sometimes, you know, I guess the best way, you know, just to kind of like find some balance, I guess, is, you know, just, you know, if the church is able to, obviously, you know, always want to look out for the brethren first, and if there's anything that they are able to do outside of that, great. But if their stance is that they can't, or they're not willing to, or it's just something that doesn't want to be touched, you know, what now can you as an individual, if you're able to, do something about that? You know what I mean? And I think that's where some of the power comes in. With some of us are blessed, for example, you know, maybe with the jobs that we have, you know, sometimes we have a little bit more that we're able to be an extension of that. So we're not using the church money, but I have my money, and as you know, a Christian, I want to help out. What am I doing out, you know, from outside the church, you know, still part of the church, but outside, that I'm able to help those, so I don't feel that I'm having any type of friction in any capacity with the church. Because sometimes the money, for example, if you collect a lot of it, but you're not doing anything with it, you know, that's another story too. You know, how is that money being used? Is it used to evangelize? And the last thing I'll just say, I'm a product. You know, if it weren't for Brandon, you know what I mean, inviting me, you know, I was going through a difficult situation in my life. Brandon, you know, I've known him for a while, but then, you know, he mentioned, hey, you know what, maybe it's time to give God a try. And then I started going, you know, he accepted me in. I would, you know, I would eat with his family, you know, before Bible studies. He would, you know, I was just part of his family for a while. And, you know, so sometimes we gotta just be careful that, you know, we just make it exclusive to a group.
Yeah.
Because, you know, then we see passages like in Matthew chapter 25, verse 35 and 36, where it's talking, when I was hungry, you know, you gave me food. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. You know, who's that in reference to? You know, it could be anyone. And sometimes we got to really think about that. But if we have the attitude and you know, as Christians, I think we could balance some of those things out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think you guys gave a lot of good stuff. I hope that our listeners can really, first of all, see the importance that as a Christian, this is a responsibility that we have, and that we got to stop yes, there is government assistance out there, but that shouldn't be the primary source that we send people. We should be willing to do what we can as Christians, trying to help one another and help our community as best as we can, because the government's not going to start teaching people how to obey the gospel, right? So and some of us are like, we hope they don't, right? Because but I mean, so we have to realize it's our responsibility. God has called us to do this. And again, I'll reemphasize that, yes, if you're giving and you're terrible with your money, keep giving, please do. However, if you really want to do the best that you can in the situation that you're in, I think it's important that you learn to manage your money well. You don't have to go to McDonald's. Maybe somebody, really needs food from you. If you keep buying those Happy Meals, you may not be able to provide and help people, so managing your money, I think, is important in this discussion. But again, the most important thing is knowing that God has done so much for us. Because we are an extension of him, being his children, we should be willing to do good towards others. So thank you guys so much for being on the show with me. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to maybe doing another podcast with y'all. Thank y'all.
Hey, you're welcome.
Thanks.
All right.
Take care.
Dude. Hey, thank you so much for watching our videos and podcasts. If you want more videos and more podcasts, you can like us on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll see you next time.